The following is a conversation with Tyler Driskell, lead instructor at Creighton Mixed Martial Arts Academy in Suwanee, Georgia, 2017 IBJJF No-Gi World Champion, and all-around great guy. Enjoy.
Hey Tyler.
Hi.
You teach my kids MMA, Jiu-Jitsu. You are an amazing motivator. You're so good with kids. I think watching you teach my kids and discipline them when they're acting up, it actually makes me a better parent, which I wanted to just share that motivation with my 3 YouTube subscribers and let them know who is Tyler Driskell. So tell me about yourself. How did you get started in Jiu-Jitsu?
So I'm currently a full-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor, teach fitness classes up here, teach kids classes. Obviously, kids classes is a pretty big part of my responsibility, as well as I run the summer camp too. So I am a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, but I think I'm a legitimate black belt in classroom control. Might be what a teacher would call the ability to organize and talk to a group of children and get them, started in different activities and keep them on task. I think I'm definitely as good at that as I am with Jiu-Jitsu. So I basically worked at summer camps my whole life, and I moved to Wyoming during college, and I was looking for a job out there. I had no idea what I was gonna do. And I was like, well, last summer I was a summer camp counselor and I worked with 5-year-olds for the first time. So I guess I got what it takes now to be a pre-K teacher. But I actually found a job pretty easily and I loved it. And so when I moved back, I got a job as a pre-K teacher, summer camp counselor, and then little kids, dealing with little kids and interacting with them became my specialty for a number of years. Went back to college, studied community health and human services, and I became a pre-K teacher as my full-time gig. Assistant pre-K teacher.
Okay.
When I was in Wyoming, I was the lead, but that was like a daycare kind of pre-K. This was like a private school where people were paying college tuition for their preschoolers to go to. So I was an assistant pre-K teacher, and the next year I did assistant 4th grade. The next year I went back to pre-K. The next year I was a substitute. And then the last year I was the lead technology teacher, which was awesome. I totally enjoyed that because I'm a science nerd, and technology is kind of like science, and kids are just naturally interested in computers and video games. And I really liked doing that. Then I was offered a full-time job here, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So for six years now, maybe 7 years, I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu full-time, running our summer camp, and teaching the kids classes.
You did Jiu-Jitsu in college.
Yeah, exactly. So Jiu-Jitsu story is a little bit different. I started doing Jiu-Jitsu when I was 18. I did it off and on for a couple years through college, and then by my last year or 2 of college, I was doing Jiu-Jitsu as much as I could, and I've been doing it as much as I could ever since. So I started 17 years ago, but I've been doing it consistently for, 13 or 14 years, and I've been doing it full time for 6 or 7. So from an outsider, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is really different than somebody who's been in the community and participates in it. From an outsider perspective, it's wrestling or it's self-defense training is what it would look like. But I do it every day, and all my training partners do it every day because it's interesting and it's challenging and it's fun. It's a fun form of exercise versus like lifting weights. Lifting weights can feel good. You know, you feel stronger. You get done, you feel good. But the act of actually lifting a weight and putting it down isn't enjoyable.
It's boring.
Correct. Kind of similar, like I would say riding a bike is more fun than just running. Going down a hill, riding a bike, you're having a good time.
Wind in your
versus
hair.
running downhill.
It's definitely more fun than riding a stationary bike.
Yes.
It's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, exactly. So like the lifting weights and the riding a stationary bike, that's exercise that's not disguised. So
Yeah.
I think most of the type of exercising that people become passionate about is exercising that's disguised within an activity where you're pushing yourself harder than you normally would because it's legitimately fun to keep doing the exercise. So for riding a bike, maybe it's keeping up with the group or just getting back to your car. With jiu-jitsu, it's another person going against you that's pushing you to go further than you might normally go if you were doing exercise that wasn't disguised in some type of activity.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a science, it's an art. Do you consider it more of a sport or self-defense?
So most people get into jiu-jitsu for the self-defense, and I really look at jiu-jitsu as the self-defense. That's a secondary benefit. That's something that just happens naturally through the repetition of doing proper jiu-jitsu movements over time. It's a game where we both kind of agree to the rule set, what's legal and what's illegal, so we both know what's expected. And then I try to work my way through different pins or control positions of your body. You try and escape, you try and attack my limbs or my neck, I try and defend. And so I look at it as a game or a sport. There's like a couple different frames of how you could train your jiu-jitsu. One is MMA, so jiu-jitsu for MMA is going to look different than jiu-jitsu for sport. So sport Brazilian jiu-jitsu is going to look different than jiu-jitsu for self-defense. So jiu-jitsu for sport, in my opinion, is the most pure form of jiu-jitsu because you're not worried about striking because that's illegal. You're not worrying about certain joint manipulations, like you can't just grab the fingers back. You can't just grab two fingers and bend them some way. So it's just a game that involves two bodies. I'm trying to exert my will on you and you're trying to do it back to me. But really good jiu-jitsu is I'm using very little effort, and to you it feels like I'm world's strongest man or world's heaviest man or whatever someone that's a lot stronger and heavier than you would feel like. So I do jiu-jitsu for the sake of sport because it's fun, it's interesting. Competing is kind of a different aspect of it. Tons of people don't compete in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They only enjoy it because it's a game and it's good exercise and it's good socialization. But Jiu-Jitsu for self-defense, some schools say that they teach Jiu-Jitsu that's framed for self-defense. And that's really all they care about. They don't care about sport Jiu-Jitsu. But if all you do is practice jiu-jitsu for self-defense, then once you get to be an upper rank, you haven't really experienced all the possibilities of what jiu-jitsu movements can happen because you've only been looking at through this certain framework of, I don't want to do this because this would leave me in a compromising situation or a compromising position if this was a self-defense encounter. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for so long and my skill level is high enough that if you were to try and hurt me, I could decide to not let that happen through my own body's movements and try to stop you from happening through through my own body's movements without having to hit you. And that's because I've played this game for years that involves our two bodies. So I do have issue with people who only do jiu-jitsu purely for self-defense, because I think that 10 years from now, the guy who only did jiu-jitsu for self-defense is not going to be nearly as skilled as someone who did jiu-jitsu just for competition or just for sport. If you look at like any of the black belt world champions really that have happened ever, if you put them in an MMA cage with someone who knows nothing, they're going to win 100% of the time, even though they've never done any striking or any self-defense. All they've ever done is play this physical game that involves wrestling. But because they've mastered that so well, someone who knows nothing is going to be completely unable to answer any of the attacks.
So looking at the sport of the thing, of the martial art, you've competed at the highest level. You've been world champion. You still compete?
So first of all, it kind of depends on your definition of highest level. So like, I don't think anyone's ever paid $50 to watch me on a pay-per-view, but I've competed in International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation tournaments, and that's all I do now. And that's kind of like the highest level organization that people compete in regularly, that a normal person could potentially compete in.
Okay.
Above IBJJFs, there's more prestigious matches and more prestigious competitions, but generally you can't just go sign up for those kind of things. I still compete sometimes. As I get older, I get a little bit less competitive, and I kind of have tried to accept that doing jiu-jitsu as an activity every day is enjoyable enough for me, and I don't have to go outside of that and compete to prove myself that I'm whatever you're trying to prove through competing, whether I'm trying to prove it to myself or to others. So the last 2 years, maybe last year and a half, I haven't competed nearly as much as before I won the world championships as a brown belt. But I don't think I'm ever going to stop competing, because it is good motivation and it really helps show you where your game is at.
You know, watching my kids in your classes, they've been coming for a short time, a few months, and I've seen them learn some lessons, sometimes very simple lessons, like shaking hands before you compete, and shaking hands respectfully, and not trying to take the other person's arm off while you're shaking hands.
Yeah, that's a hard one for kids. They want to shake hands and just come here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or, you know, at the first month, they would come home or get in the car and say, I lost every time today, or I won every time today. And it was all about the winning and the losing. And now, there's no more talk of winning and losing. It's like, what did you learn today? How did your partner compete? And now it's at a different level. My kids are still pretty young. It's like, my partner didn't bring her headgear, or something very simple. But it's not, hey, I lost, or hey, I won, which I feel like is great, a great step forward. It's small, but it's big. And so I wanted to ask you about the deep lessons that kids and adults, really anyone, can learn from martial arts, from jiu-jitsu, just the philosophy behind the sport.
So, as far as self-defense goes, one of the main things that's surprising to people when they first start doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is how much they suck, and how actually, truly, completely incapable they are of defending themselves against someone who is either bigger or more aggressive. They can be bigger and less aggressive, or smaller and more aggressive, or even someone who's skilled. How the fight scenarios in your imagination couldn't be further from what happens in reality. There was an Onion article a couple years ago, and I think it said, average American male 4,000% less effective than he believed in a fist fight. And that's what so many people see, like, day one. So we have a mixed martial arts Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy. So mixed martial arts is kind of like the full spectrum of fighting with rules: punches, kicks, elbows, knees, wrestling, judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's kind of everything. Mixed martial arts, you can come in on your first day of MMA and I can say, here's your fight stance. Okay, here's how you throw a jab and a cross. Realistically, you are not gonna master that jab cross, but when you leave class, you're gonna feel really good about that jab cross. You're like, dude, I had no idea that I have to turn my shoulders and turn my hips and turn my thumbs down, so now, oh yeah, this is what it feels like to be a boxer. Mm-hmm. Your first day of jiu-jitsu, you're gonna leave that class going, what just happened to me out there on the mat? Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier to tell that you have no idea what you're doing on the ground than it is standing. Because in general, our body, most of our movements happen while standing. We're used to standing and moving our body. You're not used to putting your back on the ground and moving your body in novel and potentially awkward ways, especially when another person's body is involved. So jiu-jitsu, first move you learn usually is going to be a shrimp. Shrimping is how you move your hips from side to side, and how you move your hips from side to side is going to be how you can move your body efficiently on the ground. First shrimp ever, you're going to have no idea what happened, and then after class you're still going to have likely no idea how to shrimp. But it's not the same way with striking. So the point of all of that was that one of the first lessons of jiu-jitsu you learn is that you probably suck really bad at fighting or potentially defending yourself with just your physical body, as well as learning that there's always bigger fish in the sea. The stereotypical, what does Joe Rogan call it? Nerd assassin. So a skinny little kid who climbs on your back and chokes you out quickly. You learn that those happen, and then that kind of changes your perspective of everything of what you assume would happen in a physical altercation outside the gym. Is, wow, I actually don't know what I'm doing, and there's people out there who look like they're nothing, who can absolutely destroy me if they wanted to. And the only thing keeping them from doing that is the fact that they don't want to. So that's one of the first lessons, especially for a male. I guess I should probably say maybe even more for a male, just because in general males care more about their ability to physically defend themselves against others. Our testosterone from our teenage years never really goes away. With females, I don't know if so many of them are interested in fighting, specifically in being able to defend themselves, but jiu-jitsu can help equalize the playing field between strength differences and between men and women. One of the other benefits of jiu-jitsu is, I'm just gonna call, what we were saying earlier, the exercise in disguise is the exercise in disguise.
Yeah.
You can be very exhausted, very tired, but when someone is pushing you, you're going to go a lot further than you would normally push yourself. Especially if, we'll say it's someone who you normally get the best of positions or submissions, and then they catch you. They catch you being like, they submit you. It's like, you tap and you get done, and you are now fully recharged, ready to continue training again, unless you've just been so destroyed that now you're just completely disheartened and you just want to survive the rest of the round. So learning to push yourself in a new way is good. And then another one, we talked about it a little bit before we had this conversation, but it's the benefit you get, the psychological and emotional benefit you get from participating in a physical endeavor that allows you to achieve a state of flow. So a flow is basically your body maneuvering itself mindlessly through some series of motions. So in order to achieve flow, you have to have some base skill of whatever activity you're doing. So there's like this, you can look at like X and Y axis, and there's like difficulty of what you're doing and your own skill level. So if that difficulty is very high and your skill level is very low, there's going to be no flow happening, because the only way you can even survive whatever you're doing, like if I was put on a triple black diamond downhill mountain biking trail, I would be only surviving, thinking about absolutely everything I'm doing. But if we turn down that difficulty and match it to the sweet spot of my ability, then now my body is able to take over and allow me to do that physical endeavor without my brain doing anything. Now, if I start thinking about something, then that takes me outside of flow. So if I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat after I'm done with my state of flow, or thinking about actually what I have to do in that physical pursuit, mountain biking, I guess road biking, you can get it. Long distance cardio athletes get it after a couple miles. So the only way you can really be in flow is without thinking about it. So it's this way of active meditation, or would it be passive meditation?
I think it's active.
I mean, your body is obviously actively moving, but you're not trying to meditate. You just like, the mindless meditation is what happens when you're in flow. So Jiu-Jitsu guys talk about flow. Flow roll, a flow roll, that flow is like talking about trying to move in a fluid way versus achieve the state of flow. But that's one of the benefits, I think one of the best benefits of Jiu-Jitsu, is being able to get into the flow state with another person. But you can't find flow until you achieve some base level of knowledge.
Yeah.
So right away, you look at that XY axis, the difficulty is very high and your skill level is very low. There is no flow. You are only thinking about somebody, man, this person is squashing my face. Ow. This person is on my leg. Why are they grabbing my arm there? Please stop doing that to my arm, sir. And you tap out. So at first there's no flow, but then once you start to program automatic movements into your body, you're able to start getting flow, and then one day, all day, every time you train, you can be in the flow state.
Have you seen Gun Maverick?
I have not.
So but you've seen the original Top Gun, of course. You are a red-blooded American.
That's correct, absolutely.
So the first day or two of lessons where Tom Cruise is teaching these pilots, these men and women that are the best of the best. They all graduated from the Top Gun school as the top of their class, and he's teaching them. He's dogfighting, and he's just beating them every time. He's winning, and then his boss brings him in and says, "Maverick, what are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm teaching them." He says, all that you've taught them is that they are losing every single time. You're teaching them how to lose. And he said, "No, I'm teaching them that everything they thought they knew is worthless. And now I'm going to take it to the next level and teach them to go to a deeper spot and to stop thinking, get in the flow, and accomplish this mission."
Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking about as you were talking about the flow and just coming in on your first day and not knowing anything.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the difference, or how men and women, boys and girls, differ in how competitive they are. You know, testosterone versus, you know, or self-defense or fighting. And I agree with most of that, and probably in most cases. But I was telling you, I did Tae Kwon Do in college, and there was a girl, black belt, in the class that had come in, and I was a senior in school, and she was a freshman, and I was a brown belt, and she was a black belt, and we were sparring, and I hit her with the cross, and of course we have pads on, and she had a headgear, but it bloodied her lip, and she just went like that and looked at the blood on her thumb, and then she squared up, and she jumped and spun 180 degrees, and then her leg came out and lifted me off the ground from my crotch. Luckily, I was wearing a cup, and it wasn't as painful as it otherwise would have been, but I will never forget that, you know, it's not always the boys that are the best. She was very strong, very good, very skilled, and and I've seen, you know, guys and girls in here, and a lot of the guys are really good, and a lot of the girls are really good. So it's neat to see that you know, this is a sport for everybody.
So especially in the kids classes, I would say usually until maybe like 12 years old, boys and girls are a 100% equal matchup, equal physicality. And I mean that in terms of the more skilled or the aggressor is going to win. Nobody ever has the clear physical advantage until after 12. But before then, it's pretty cool, you know. Some new boy will be going with a experienced girl, be like, I don't want to go with this girl, I don't want to hurt her. I'm like, my friend, you treat her like a boy. I'm like, okay, I don't know. And then the girl like immediately grabs his head and throws him, or shoots for a double leg and takes him down. And then the boy learns like really quickly that girls are really capable of doing jiu-jitsu and beating you up.
Yeah.
So some of our best kids are girls. Girls are, especially at camp, it's so weird, but like little girls tend to be really, they just listen better. I'm talking about my last 15, 20 years of childcare in general. Little girls are way easier to deal with than little boys. That's my experience I've always been through.
Yeah. So
at teenage years, they get to be kind of equal. So it's kind of opposite in that regard. Once they're teenagers, girls and boys get to be more equal in terms of how they listen.
So you've been doing jiu-jitsu for a long time. You obviously enjoy it. That's probably a large part of how you stay motivated. But I'm curious, like how do you stay healthy? How do you, you know, as far as cross training outside, you know, to keep your heart rate up? You probably maybe you get all the exercise you need in here, but do you cross train? And intertwined with that is your philosophy around nutrition, and you know, you follow a certain diet to stay in shape. So, you know, what's your overall philosophy on fitness and nutrition?
So the kind of like the generalized fitness plan for peak like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu performance is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training and lifting weights, because so much of Jiu-Jitsu is cardio, you know, relatively high output for a sustained period of time. So you get your cardio doing Jiu-Jitsu, but you want to be stronger, so you lift weights. You just don't see a lot of high-level Jiu-Jitsu guys go out and run 5 miles a day every day as part of their training, or go on extended swim or bike rides. Like, now somebody might do that for enjoyment or because that's part of their own routine that they've always done, but for pure sports performance benefits, you do jiu-jitsu for cardio and you lift weights on top of that. So that's what my physical output looks like. Is I do jiu-jitsu a lot. I teach and I train 9 times a week. Maybe some of those classes I'm training in I don't teach, but I do get to train in every class that I teach, and then I get to train in other classes as well. So 9 jiu-jitsu sessions a week is a decent amount.
Not including the kids sessions.
No.
That's a lot
just
of
the
jiu-jitsu.
adult. Yeah, that's a lot of jiu-jitsu. I've been doing that since I started working full-time here, more or less. So because of that, my caloric output's pretty high. And like yesterday, we were talking some about diet and stuff. I'm into fasting only because, like, I didn't know the term intermittent fasting until somebody told me one day that, oh, you don't eat breakfast or lunch sometimes, you like intermittent fasting. But now it's a thing that everyone knows. So I fast a lot, and sometimes it gets to be difficult, like not eating breakfast and lunch and just eating dinner, especially if, like, normally on Tuesdays and Thursdays when I fast till dinner, I wake up and do the 6:30 a.m. jiu-jitsu class. I train and I teach, and then I have a pretty tough private lesson with someone else who just wants to train, so we just do jiu-jitsu, and then I help and maybe do some of the fitness class, and then I go to just another side gig I have, and then I come back to the gym and I train and teach for 5 hours. Well, I have the 2 kids classes and then 3 adult classes, and I usually get to train in those 3 adult classes afterwards. But then I eat dinner after all that.
Your first meal of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So before that, it's just water.
How's your energy level for those?
Honestly, feel totally fine. Feel great.
I'm the same way. I can go out.
Feel totally fine.
I can ride my bike for 2 hours. I can lift for a half hour, and then go run 4 miles. And I keep the same pace as if I actually am better. If I eat before, I feel like I have a rock in my gut.
Like you're slower? Yeah.
I'm slower. It takes me a longer time. I might have a higher energy level toward at the end of a long bike ride, but the first half of that bike ride, I just feel sick. And I would rather have a steady energy level, which I have when I'm fasting, than the rush and then the coming down. I just like to have a steady energy level. And actually, my energy level, I feel like, goes up after maybe 12 to 16 hours. I get a bump in energy.
You're saying 12 to 16 of not eating?
Of fasting, yeah.
I'm trying to think of what my timeline actually looks like. I usually don't end up, even on like my fasting days, I usually don't eat till probably 10 p.m. So I have like a really short, so that would be like what, a 22-hour fast or something like that.
Right.
If I'm worried about my output being really extraordinarily high or something, I will take some electrolyte solutions just to avoid cramping up, because I drink a pretty incredible amount of water during those days. But the only reason I do this now is because of convenience, and before it's just slowly something that happened over time where you get used to skipping breakfast. People who aren't used to skipping breakfast can't even imagine that.
Right.
Then you start getting used to skipping lunch. People who never skip lunch can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
You just keep adding to what's kind of normalized. And now, like, before summer camp, like, I was only eating dinner as my only meal on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday night, and it was fine. And I probably did that for 2-3 months. It's kind of the way my schedule's just kind of started working out.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel great doing it. I kind of look forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now it's like I eat lunch and I feel like it slows me down some.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I would rather just have like a giant bottle of really cold water and like a cup of room temperature coffee. And like I feel great. It's like all I need is more cold water and coffee. Some not hot coffee, and I'm fine.
So on fasting, my brother recently lost over 30 pounds, maybe 40 or a little over 40, but just the transformation in his body, and I think he had benefits in his brain. He just he feels better, he looks better, and that was the main thing that he changed. He cut out fast food. I don't think he was eating a lot of fast food. He eats a lot of whole foods, but he's on the road a lot, so he probably eats some fast food. And he cut out sweets, which I don't think he was eating a lot of anyway, but he made some minor tweaks, but the major thing he did was fasting. And interesting that you're doing the same thing.
So this giant, long drawn out build up was to basically say, because of my caloric output and my fasting, my diet is, I basically have no dietary restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
I can pretty much eat as much as I want, because I think for my size, I think I can eat 4,000 calories a day to maintain my body weight that I have.
Without exercising?
No, with my.
That's a lot of calories.
Yeah.
And you're maintaining, so you're consuming probably 4,000 a day.
Yeah.
In a 2-hour period.
Sometimes
How do you feel after that?
Sometimes I do. I go to bed. It's perfect.
I don't sleep as well.
I go to bed. It's perfect.
When I wait and I just have dinner and I eat, sometimes I'll eat 3,000 or 4,000 calories in a 2-hour period.
Yeah.
And I don't feel good after that. So I like to stretch it out when I'm maybe 4 hours.
Oh, okay.
Especially if I consume the bulk of my calories in the beginning of that 4-hour period. And I always like to have dinner. That's usually the last thing I do. Is I like to have dinner with my family.
Yeah.
It's very important to me, and I try to restrict that to like 1,000 or 1,200 calories, and then I sleep better.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's like something that I've trained myself. Well, I mean, I work late here. You know, like last night I left the gym after 9. So by the time I get home, get showered off, it's like I'm ready to eat, and now I've had a really long day. I'm ready to just pass out. So that's what a lot of my nighttime looks like. But I don't have that family routine thing in the same way at all, because I work so late. Because that's the nature of closing up a gym at nighttime.
Yeah.
So.
Switching gears a little bit, for competing, for just improving in general, you mentioned getting into the flow and moving meditation. Do you use any kind of more traditional meditation or visualization? Just this fly is killing me.
Bro.
But just thinking about this is how this fight is going to go, and if this person does this, I'm going to do this. Or do you use that kind of mind games with yourself?
So I usually only do the visualization thing as a way to relieve anxiety before a tournament, for the time leading up until a tournament. So anytime I start to feel nervous, I just start doing jiu-jitsu in my head. I try to imagine, and I encourage the same thing, the visualization to my students of where you're going to be. You know, like I tend to compete in the same couple type venues. So where am I going to be? What is it going to look like? What am I going to wear? What's it going to feel like? What's it going to sound like? What's my opponent going to look like? How does the match start? So I try to put myself there, and then from there I try to only have positive visualizations. I think it would likely be bizarre to imagine yourself losing 1,000 times before a match. That doesn't seem like you could really get any benefit about that.
Yeah.
But if I implement my game 10,000 times in the 2 months before the match, then hopefully when that time comes, I'll be better prepared for it. Usually still, most jiu-jitsu competitors will say the same thing. The first match is the hardest one. The first match is the weirdest one. You hear people say a lot, weird, because it's just harder to get to flow in your first match. You're not warmed up yet, everything. Just first match is weird. After your first match, most people could say they can do jiu-jitsu the rest of the day. But the first match is tough to get through. For me, in my first match, usually this, it's like the Alfred Hitchcock, the shot he does that's now like recreated in like horror and thriller movies, where he takes the camera and he's moving the camera physically forward while zooming out, or vice versa. He's moving the camera away while zooming in. It does this weird thing to the foreground and the background where the focus isn't really changing, but it's kind of changing the perspective between these two. It's really eerie. But once you see what that effect is, moving backwards while zooming in, once you see what that is, you'll recognize it for forever. But you get this kind of like feeling in your head of like, oh, this is the moment I've been thinking about for all of these months, that I've been building up for and planning for, and it's right now. And usually that happens to me in my first match. It's like you just kind of get this eerie feeling of like, oh, here it is, this is it. Okay. And then you get through that, and then your match is over, and you're like, oh yeah, all right,
Nice.
Glad that's over with. Let's get on from here.
It reminds me of Rocky. I don't know if it was the original Rocky, but he had that old guy was a trainer, and he had his right hand like strapped to his body, and all he could do was throw jabs. And Rocky's like, yo Mick, I'm tired of throwing jabs, or whatever he said.
Yeah.
And Mick's like, if you're gonna throw 1,000 jabs in the match, you're gonna prepare by throwing 100,000 jabs. And that's not visualization, but it's repetition, and you can do that without tiring out the body, just by thinking about it. And I think there's a lot of benefits to that. You obviously do too. Any books that you recommend, or authors? I know when I was doing martial arts in college, we every semester we had to read the same book, A Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. We had to write a report about it, and I still remember a lot of the lessons from that book. Do you guys here at the studio recommend or require any reading for your students?
Dude, I don't think I've ever read anything. There's one jiu-jitsu associated book that really kind of blew my mind, because it talks about the history of Japanese jiu-jitsu, judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, self-defense, MMA, sport jiu-jitsu. It's called Mastering Jiu-Jitsu. It's by John Danaher, Renzo Gracie. Paul has some pictures up here in the back when he was one of the ukis, which is like one of the people demonstrating the moves in the book. That book is pretty cool. Outside of that, I really don't read anything and have never read anything self-help, self-betterment, motivational. I don't know, I don't feel like I'm an extremely motivated person besides being motivated in things that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the term is like a type B activity, is like a physical, some type of physical pursuit or hobby that might not be enjoyable in the traditional sense. So like sitting on your sofa under the blankets eating ice cream is absolutely a very enjoyable experience. But a lot of physical pursuits kind of hurt. I mean, when you break it down to its base level, like lifting weights, that actually, like that hurts. It feels good too, but it is pain. So these hobbies where people, it's not type A, like traditionalist things that people enjoy doing, it's type B. So I would consider Jiu-Jitsu one of those. And backpacking and hiking as well. Like those are, you're having fun and it is enjoyable, but it's also the physical act ultimately isn't comforting the same way as being at home under the blankets is.
Yeah.
So I've never had a problem with motivation, is the point of saying that, because I really enjoy doing these things. So maybe a year during the pandemic, I decided I wanted to start becoming more well-read.
Mm-hmm.
So I started just trying to read some classic works of literature. Turns out a lot of classic works of literature are not that enjoyable. And they're really difficult to read.
Uh-huh.
So the main person, I'd probably say half of what I've read in my life is Kurt Vonnegut. I've read, I think I'm like 5 books away from reading like everything he's ever published. And so he kind of counts as sci-fi. He doesn't like to say he's a sci-fi author, but if you go to Barnes & Noble, Kurt Vonnegut is going to be in the sci-fi section. So, and most of what I read is some type of sci-fi. I'm not interested in Lord of the Rings sci-fi. I'm not so interested in Star Trek sci-fi. I'm not interested in like so Lord of the Rings, we would call that fantasy. Star Trek, I would call that, I mean, that's fantasy as well. As far as we know, there's no such thing as faster than light travel. So imagining ourselves being on ships with a variety of alien species traveling to different solar systems is kind of absurd. So that's fantasy. So I don't read that kind of stuff either. I'm only interested in stuff that can actually happen and future dystopias. I've read most of the major future dystopias. In 1984, Brave New World. I think Player Piano should be up there as well.
I read those early in the pandemic, and it just was, although I had read 1984 before, they were just mind-blowing how it was like that was playing out.
What? Correct. So humanity's future is going to be some type of dystopia. And so if you read, we'll say the 5 or 10 most famous dystopian fictional novels, humanity's future is going to involve aspects from those. That doesn't mean that like 1984 was not a 100% prediction for what is going to be happening to today. But you read 1984 and you see a lot of what's happening today. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Correct. So future dystopias allow us to have this window into humanity's potential future. What are we going to look like 100 years from now? How is society going to be different than it is today? And is there actually anything wrong with that? Or am I just wearing my modern day glasses? So imagining something outside of that is incomprehensible for me. you know, like every generation, the old men look down on the young men and say, you know, this new generation is weak.
Yeah.
They're distracted. Back in my day, things were better, but it's just us wearing those generational glasses of whatever we grew up with, whatever we learned was the truth. And if you believe in a different truth, then you're wrong. So when in reality, it's just different.
Yeah. But there's no case where in the future, whether it's we're better off as a society or worse off, there's no case where us bettering ourselves and being fitter and just eating a better diet, having better nutrition, being able to defend ourselves, that's going to be a benefit no matter what happens in the future. And you know, I told you before we started talking on the
that's true.
camera that a few years ago I got on this journey and lost 40 pounds, and have started out doing the boring stuff, just going to a class and being told you're going to lift these weights this many times and 1 hour class every day, and it was somewhat fun, somewhat boring, and now I try to do only the stuff that's fun. I find that that's the only way that I can stay motivated, and you know, that's what I sort of tell people that look at me and say, you know, you've lost a bunch of weight, you know, you look good, and I feel good, and I say, you know, how do you do it? Well, the way I did it is not the way you need to do it. You need to find something that you enjoy, and then as long as you're moving and not necessarily comfortable, maybe you've got a backpack on and you're out hiking in the woods, you don't have, I think actually discomfort is a good thing, putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, whether it's with somebody heavier and more skilled than you on top of you grinding your face into the mat, or backpack in the woods, or lifting weights, whatever it is that you enjoy. I think it's important, and that's really why I started this thing that we're doing, and I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me and talk about your experience. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to let people know about?
Really, the only, I guess, kind of anecdote I wanted to share was about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specifically. So what tends to be the path of most who start Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is they come try a class and they have no idea what's happening, and that's fine. That's kind of the universal path. You have no idea what's happening, you're really confused. It comes to live training, even if it's like specific live training where you're zoomed in on just worry about this couple things, you know, somebody being beside you on top of you versus straight on top of you, like just worry about this one position. Even if you're in specific positional drilling, and you only have to worry about a little bit of stuff, ultimately you're going against other people who have no idea what they're doing. And so you are both trying maybe 90 to 95% maximum effort. You have no idea where your body needs to be positioned or in what way you need to move your body. So you try to rely on your physical attributes, your strength and your speed to make up for that lack of knowledge of proper positioning or proper weight distribution, you know, how your body needs to be oriented relative to your training partner. So you make up for that with strength. So what you get is these two rams just butting heads, both trying as hard as they can against one another. And again, beginners doing jiu-jitsu, having no idea what's happening. But the first time I really felt someone do jiu-jitsu completely destroy me and smother me and submit me easily without even trying, that was completely mind-blowing and really inspirational to me. And so when somebody comes into jiu-jitsu and they really like it, I try to tell them, Just wait till you're out of the intro, or even if they don't like it, listen, nobody knows what they're doing at first. Wait till you're out of the intro class, start coming to the all levels class. I'll put you with someone experienced, and it's going to completely change your mind about what's possible. And now, as an instructor, I'm not trying to be the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitor on the planet, but I do legitimately want to be the best Jiu-Jitsu practitioner that any individual feels like they've ever gone against. So I remember the best person I ever did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu against. And he was a Jedi master, and I was a slug. I had no idea. And I was a brown belt, and I was winning competitions at the time. And I did nothing. I could do nothing. He was barely trying. And that was at a brown belt. I remember the first time when I started Jiu-Jitsu getting beat by a blue belt who wasn't trying at all. So having your eyes open by not someone who just beats you, but by someone who beats you while their heart rate is like 80, 85,
And you're at 120.
and they're not exactly, and they're not sweating very much. That was so inspirational to me at the beginning and as a brown belt, that now that's my goal, is to be able to give my students that inspiration. So when I come in here, I try my very best to not try very hard, because I want to show them that good jiu-jitsu can be effortless. Now, if it's competition or I'm going against someone who's extremely skilled, then I'm going to have to try. That's just natural. But for the guys who are newer at jiu-jitsu and even been training almost 10 years, I try to try as little as I can in terms of my physical effort and just use jiu-jitsu, because I want to be inspirational to the people I'm doing jiu-jitsu against.
That's beautiful. It is. It's inspiring to me, that I have. It's like pulling teeth to get my kids to come here. It's so weird, because they usually get off the bus, or now it's summer, they're playing with their friends, and I say, okay guys, time for MMA. Oh, Dad, I don't want to go. And then we get here, and they're like, come play with us. Come, we play dodgeball before every class. And they're like, come on, Dad, come on. And they're so excited. And then you get them, and you're like, everybody against the wall. And they're like, okay. And then we leave class. I say, how'd you guys like it? And they're like, it was awesome. And it's such a night and day difference. I don't know how they do. Why can't transfer that excitement that they have after the class to the beginning of the next class. But I think that's just part of being kids, and they're in the moment, and they don't want to leave that moment to go to the next moment, which may or may not be awesome. It has been awesome 100% of the time before.
Totally.
But I mean, you're inspiring. You're so good with the kids. You're so good at, obviously at jiu-jitsu. I've never seen you in an adult class, but one day. And I'll tell you, be careful, because I've watched a lot of UFC. So, I have some skills that I have to take from my brain, and that might take 2 or 3 classes, maybe 1,000 classes. No, I'm looking forward to it. I think I told you on day one when I brought the kids in that I've been coming to this gym for probably 10 years, and watching a class here and there, trying a class. I've wanted to do it. You guys are the best around, and you're doing a lot of good things for the community and making a positive impact. And now my family gets to benefit from that, and I really appreciate what you're doing.
No, thank you so much. Thank you, and thanks for having me.
All right, Tyler.